Welcome, everybody. Appreciate everyone joining us here for this 1 year anniversary of the launch of the Moonbeam network. Um, yeah, I mean, what a year it's been. Like I was joking with the rest of the team that it's both feels like it's been like a really long time and a really short time, depending on how I look at it. Um, there's a lot of things have happened in the last year, not only on Moonbeam but in the Web3 space in general. But there's been like a ton of progress and just a lot of great developments on Moonbeam, some of which we'll talk about when we share some data and some stats. But I figured I would just kick things off. On this 1 year anniversary, it was January 11th. 2022, when Moonbeam as a decentralized network first launched and went live. If I think back to, what were the like original motivations? Like, what is it that was the idea behind Moonbeam, and what were the principles that were important to us? I figured it might make sense to just review those because I think they're still very much kind of the driving ideas behind the project and in the community. And in some ways, while there's been a lot of development, some things haven't changed. And so when I think back to the original motivation, it was to, for Moonbeam, it was to be a smart contract environment that first and foremost, prioritize security and reliability. And so, even on PureStake as a primary contributor to the code base of the network, and this is something that we talk about a lot. It guides a lot of technical kind of implementation decisions in the code. We have a standing rule of even if there's some feature that's very important, that'll always take a backseat to concerns about like the security or the reliability like of the network. And so I think that's kind of how, as folks doing a lot of the implementation, we can contribute towards the network, is maintaining this like security and like reliability at all times. And so that continues to be the case. I think that's something that Moonbeam has made a name of itself as being something that is like very reliable to use. I think having a great developer experience is also part of the original vision, and that continues today. That's led to a lot of the integrations that are deployed in and around the network. A lot, if you look at like the documentation site, there's been a huge amount of energy that's been put into documentation and supporting different teams that are using the network. And so that's I think I'm kind of proud of that reputation that Moonbeam has as being this place that is offers this great user experience. But what we'll see actually when we're talking a little bit later about some of the ongoing initiatives, decentralization is another big one, right? So when you're designing like an L1, a lot of there's trade-offs to be made, right? And so some of the key trade-offs that you see different people making are around decentralization versus, say, like block time or performance. Like that's like a trade-off that a lot of different L1s have made different choices around. And I'd say that from the start, the idea on Moonbeam was to always like lean like heavily in favor of decentralization, even if that came at the expense of some other properties that were desirable. And that continues to be the case. And that's like a lot of the community-oriented initiatives that are around now are really focused around increasing and further decentralization of the governance of the network and how decisions get made. And so that's a theme that will carry forward, into this year. But I would end by saying, of course, the use case focus around Moonbeam, was the original idea was to focus on cross-chain use cases, and that continues. So we have a lot of great like use cases, teams that are implementing different kinds of cross-chain use cases. There's all kinds of new technologies that are available. Many of them were shipped this year that enable cross-chain use cases. So things like XCM, a lot of the general message passing protocols that allow for messages and different connections to be made from Moonbeam to other L1s like Ethereum mainnet. And so that continues to be kind of a driving principle or a theme around the network. And so I think those things like were some of the original motivations. I think they're still as relevant like now, a year in, as they were back when the project started and back, a year ago when the project launched. And, it's just amazing to me to see like all of the things that have happened, like, in this like last year. You kind of have a hand in kind of creating, a decentralized protocol like this. And obviously the actual things that happen go far beyond the imagination that you had, like, when it was first created. And that is definitely the case with Moonbeam, that, I continue to be kind of amazed and surprised at all of the, ingenious kind of things, all of the interactions that Moonbeam has helped facilitate. And I'm kind of looking forward to another year of being surprised, in this way. I think that that's what I had for my intro here, and I know we're going on to some other topics now.
Great, thank you, Derek. I think that was a good level set for where Moonbeam has been driving toward and sort of where we are today. To help kind of color that with some of the data that we've seen through public data sources and on chain, we actually have just a quick couple of numbers that we wanted to run through. If my very special presenters could go ahead and put the slides up. Ta-da. Okay, so what has the first year of Moonbeam looked like for the PureStake team and the Moonbeam Foundation? We really relied quite heavily on public data sources to kind of provide a pulse for where the network is today, and of course help understand where it could go in the future. There's a few things that in particular have really gone very well, considering the market that we saw in 2022. And so we wanted to highlight a few things. The first is transaction growth. So transactions over the past 12 months, we've had over 24 million transactions. That number includes all sorts of different interactions with the chain. It can include staking, governance, crowd loan redemption claims, as well as balance transfers and other sorts of interactions. If you look kind of at this data in a little more detail, you'll see that 15 million of those 24 million happened on the Moonbeam EVM, which is of course where kind of the bulk of activity occurs, certainly from a dApp perspective, but even beyond that, when we're looking at certain kinds of staking transactions and so forth, a lot of that does occur on the EVM. Beyond that, from a monthly perspective, we see about, I think the average, I don't know if I want to quote it offhand, but we see quite a few transactions on a monthly basis, and that is overall trending to increases over time. Can you go to the next one? Where we've seen the most growth is, of course, over unique addresses. So that includes not only unique addresses on the chain as a whole, which is currently 1.6 million, about 1 million of those are contract addresses, with the remaining 600,000. They're what we call EOAs, which are externally owned accounts, but that represents essentially an address that isn't owned by a contract, isn't owned by code, it's owned by a person. And so we look at both of these to kind of give us an indication of usage and adoption and traction. And you can see here that we've had exponential growth in the past 3 months. Actually, I believe the number is 80% of all of the addresses that have been created have happened in the last 90 days. Beyond that, one of the things that we've always prided ourselves in, if you go back to the previous slide, is developer adoption. And I think that's really hard for folks who are kind of just interacting with the dApp layer of Moonbeam to experience directly. But fortunately, the block does a great job at capturing some of the activity that we see every day through Telegram chats and developers interacting with the chain directly, trying test transactions on Moonbase Alpha and so forth. And so we did want to also highlight sort of here at the bottom, when you look at weekly active developers for EVM chains, Moonbeam continues to be one of the top chains by developer activity. And that, I think, is really where Moonbeam stands apart, not only in, kind of characterizing the number of dApps that we expect to continue to launch on the chain, but also to kind of characterize that we're sort of continuing to see enthusiasm, engagement, and deployments on top of Moonbeam, even though, of course, we're coming out of the holidays here in the Western world, and certainly some kind of rocky market circumstances, like that has not swayed developers. Folks seem to be as enthusiastic as ever with deploying to Moonbeam. And then I think this is the last one here that we'll kind of run through. But one of the really interesting things that Polkadot has enabled is what we call forkless upgrades. And so when you look at Moonbeam over the past really 13 months, if you look at kind of block production, day zero Genesis block, there's been 18 forkless upgrades that are passed through on-chain governance. And for folks who maybe haven't been that involved in the Polkadot ecosystem or aren't as familiar with what that means, one of the great things about being on Substrate is that you can upgrade the chain directly through governance. There's no, sort of external processes here. And so that's been 18 upgrades on Moonbeam. That's 15 since the January 11th launch, which was full functionality, of course. And I think that the on-chain governance piece is really important. It's something that we'll talk about in a little bit more detail later. As the network continues to kind of grow and flourish, on-chain governance, I think, will begin to become more and more important, especially with some of the updates that are happening on the OpenGov side. So we'll dive into that a little bit deeper, but it is worth noting that, updating kind of the state of the network itself is a frequent occurrence and is something that's kind of uniquely enabled by the Polkadot architecture. And then staking. So staking on Moonbeam, right now we see actually over 50% of the circulating supply staked with collators on Moonbeam, which also contributes to the daily active addresses, of course, right? Folks are kind of coming back and engaging with Moonbeam directly. And so those are things that we look at pretty frequently as well. For Moonbeam, one of the most important things that we've sort of we find to be really beneficial from a technology perspective is what we refer to as connected contracts. And so you might have heard this term, particularly in the last 6 months or so, but really what we're talking about with connected contracts is the concept that you can have an application kind of centered on Moonbeam that interacts with multiple blockchains at the same time. And the way that Moonbeam is able to create a platform that enables this is through all of these connections to other chains, both within the Polkadot ecosystem and outside of the Polkadot ecosystem. And so just to provide sort of an update there, there are 8 parachains currently connected to Moonbeam, full connections that are live. We're also connected to the Polkadot relay chain, which is, of course, where the DOT token is located. And in addition, there are what we call general message passing protocols. So these are things that allow secure messages with chains outside of this ecosystem. Some of the integrations that exist there include Axelar, Layer 0, Wormhole, Hyperlane, and more, of course, will likely join in the future. And so when you look at what's enabled on that side, that also connects Moonbeam to 16 other Layer 1s and Layer 2s outside of the Polkadot ecosystem. And so for developers who are building on top of Moonbeam, this provides a really interesting advantage where they're able to sort of tap into a multitude of resources on many different chains, all from within an application that is, headquartered on Moonbeam in many ways, and then has sort of satellite instances on other chains. So we expect that this is something that you'll hear more about, certainly in the future. And we're excited to see how much progress the technology has made in the last few months. So I wanted to jump back to the previous slide as well and give Derek sort of an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the connected contracts piece and really kind of add to my comments when it comes to connected contracts. And so Derek, I know your explanation tends to differ a little bit from mine in the sense that I kind of portray these things at the highest possible level. But if you don't mind just going into a little more detail about, sort of how Moonbeam has grown and really become differentiated in its own right over the last 12 months.
Yeah, no, and I think that it's right on, as I mentioned in my opening remarks. This kind of focus on cross-chain use cases is something that was there from the start. It's something that informed even the choice of kind of implementation technologies using Substrate, ultimately targeting like a Polkadot parachain deployment. A lot of that was driven by the cross-chain capabilities that were provided. And I mean, the analogy I use is this, that, basically in 2022 is like when, for the first time, most of these technologies like shipped, where now it's possible to have this kind of networking layer, is how I think of it. Right? I use this kind of analogy with computing often. So, you have all these blockchains are like computers in a way, they're like community computers. And so for the first time, there's like a networking layer. There's like an ability to, send messages to and from these different computers, like, from one to the other. And so, think about how when, you had regular computers and they were all of a sudden networked for the first time, either locally or then ultimately with the internet, that opened like a huge amount of like possibilities, right? New architectures, new use cases, new, new ways of new kinds of applications, some of which, drove, a lot of the growth in computing itself. And so I see this kind of blockchain or Web3 version no differently, right? So for the first time, we have now this like networking capability, so that an ability to send messages between different chains. And this is kind of keeping with my vision of a world in which there's many blockchains and they're all able to talk to each other. And so that's been part of the driving force behind like the ideas for Moonbeam. And so 2022 is really a big year because that's when a lot of these technologies were just first shipped. There's some of them have been worked on for many years, but things like XCM, all these GMP protocols that Katie, you mentioned, these are all new. They all came out in 2022. And so now that there's this new capability, I think it's, we're starting to see development teams start to like use these new capabilities in new and interesting ways. And so if there's anything, that I want for Moonbeam, it's to be this infrastructure that developers can use to tap into this new potential in like an easy, secure and reliable way, as I was mentioning before. And yeah, all sorts of innovations. We're seeing things like, hub and spoke architectures where you now have an app that's spanning multiple chains. It might have its hub on Moonbeam, but be connected, have these kind of branch offices, let's call them, like on a bunch of other chains. I think that ultimately it leads to this idea that maybe even what chain you're on matters less, right? In the current way of thinking, like, people are very kind of can be maxi and they're like, oh, I'm on Polkadot, I'm on Ethereum mainnet, I'm on whatever chain I'm on. I anticipate in the future that users are going to be less aware of what chain they're on, right? You might have some whole collection of chains that are servicing, your requests and what you want to do. But, this kind of idea of being on one chain or another will start to fade as you get kind of more abstract and better user experiences coming in. And then there might be, 5-6 chains like behind the scenes that are, that are working on your behalf. And so this is all enabled by this idea of having, these cross-chain capabilities that are now, in production, are able to be used by developers. And that's kind of the vision for Moonbeam, is to be this great place where you can use all of these new technologies and where ultimately, Moonbeam could be a hub of these cross-chain messages that are connecting like applications and users like in this diverse, Web3 ecosystem.
Can you just give an example of how an end user experience might change, like how it looks today versus in hopefully the near future, how it might look with some of these cross-chain connections?
Yeah, I think the key thing from my mind, and I've talked about this before, the user experience right now for using Web3 apps is like challenged relative to Web2 apps. And one of the key sources of challenges is that users have to know a lot about the infrastructure that they're interacting with. So, you might have a use case where, you need to, do something with your wallet to get hooked up to a chain. You need to use bridging infrastructure. You might need to go figure out how to use that. And so there's all these extra steps and all these different pretty complex pieces of software you need to understand in order to use the system. And I think that cross-chain technologies have the opportunity to kind of create an abstraction layer, because users ultimately don't even care or want to know about those things. And so, that's a key thing for me, is that, by hiding away this infrastructural complexity, you can make a better user experience. And you can, again, kind of this concept of what chain you're using starts to diminish over time. You're just using an application and you're trying to, do something specific with that application.
I know that the intention sort of this presentation is to sort of give a Moonbeam 1-year update, but since we just kind of crossed the end of year here and we're now into a fresh year with 2023, when we look at kind of your sense of what will happen in 2023, that's kind of important. Do you see these connected contracts, this secure messaging technology, being kind of the number one thing for you?
I think it's definitely like one of the most important like innovations in Web3 in general. And it is the case though that you create this new capability, and then devs kind of learn about it and understand, oh, I have this whole new canvas I can draw on, and then you start to see those drawings come. And that's where we are now, is where there's a number of teams already that were early adopters of these technologies that are moving like on into like production like in the first half of this year, like on Moonbeam. And so yeah, I'm definitely like quite excited about that. I think that's going to be an important theme for the year, along with obviously there's some other things that are happening on Moonbeam, like governance and some other things that you had mentioned before.
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit that we can share in terms of activity that's kind of upcoming, and we'll kind of wait for the end to go through some of that in more detail. In the interim, we have a special guest today who I'm hoping my backstage magicians can pop up here. And so we have Emily, who is freshly minted as the Director of Ecosystem Marketing and Community. Am I getting that right?
Yes, correct.
So I am so glad you could join us. I think what's really special about 1 year of Moonbeam being kind of fully functional on top of Polkadot is that it's also 1 year of parachains being fully functional on top of Polkadot, 1 year of smart contracts on top of Polkadot. And so I think I wanted to be able to reflect on both of those milestones, in addition to, of course, what Moonbeam has been able to achieve. So thank you for joining us. And I do want to start out with hopefully a softball question. Maybe you can start us off here, Emily. When we look at what it means to have kind of these parachains live on Polkadot after 1 year, like what has that kind of indicated for you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, it's only been 1 year, and what a crazy, wild 1 year it has been. So since parachains have launched just a year ago, we're sitting at 36 parachains on top of Polkadot, or auction winners, so to speak. And of those 36, 2 of them are also what we call system parachains, or you may have heard of them being called common good parachains. And this is essentially like when you think of the iPhone and the App Store, when you get your phone, it comes with things like the flashlight app and the mail app and the phone app. You don't have to go to the App Store and download everything. But then, of course, there's also the App Store as well. And that's kind of the same concept on Polkadot, where you have these auction winning parachains, and then you have these system parachains that once you connect, you have this functionality that you don't need to worry about building yourself, because it will be on these system parachains. And so as of now, we have 2 of them. Statement, which is more like an assets parachain. You can mint any token on there. Any projects can, even you as yourself can. I can go mint myself there. I can go mint an NFT there. And then collectives, which is really like a chain for any sort of collective. So far on there, we have the Polkadot Alliance, which some parachain teams have launched, as well as the Fellowship, right? This governance party that is really for OpenGov and the next layer of governance. So with all of that, roughly Polkadot has had an auction every week or every 2 weeks since parachains have launched. And every single auction has had a winner. There has always been demand. There has always been teams wanting to get on board. So I think that's, a really significant milestone to show like the power of the teams and the community that want to be a part of this network, not just this technology, as well as we've seen 130 million DOT contributed to all of these parachains to back all of their lease slots. So that's really the community actually showing their support for these chains, which you can't really measure on any other network. You can't tell me how much the community wants any other chain on any other network, but you can actually measure it on Polkadot, because those that choose to go through the crowd loan mechanism, it's comprised of like community loans. I would say loans because they do get their full dot back at the end of the parachain lease slot, but they really show their support for these chains being added to the network. So that's truly significant. And then lastly, I would just say the quality of the teams and these, even though some might say 36 is a big number, some might say 36 is a small number. Regardless, it's a very diverse ecosystem. While we do have DeFi chains and NFT chains, what a lot of people think blockchain only is these days, which it is, we do have some bleeding edge DeFi chains and NFT chains, but we also have a diverse ecosystem with chains like social media chains and identity, supply chain, metaverses, tokenized real world assets, carbon credits, and like green parachains, zero knowledge. You have smart contract platforms like Moonbeam with a whole suite of dApps on top of them. You have privacy and robonomic chains, and you have IoT and just so much more. So I think that also is like looking back at like the ecosystem that now exists on top of Polkadot. I think we can say that it's truly been a successful year.
It's interesting too, when you mentioned 36, I think it's easy for people to forget. I tend to describe Polkadot as a way to build blockchains, a new way to build blockchains. And so it's not just 36 projects, it's 36 new blockchains in the first 12 months of having this kind of functionality available to the world, which I personally think is very telling. But with that in mind, of course, one of the things that we were happy to be a part of is this community element that you mentioned as well. I think there's very few places in the world, blockchain or otherwise, where individual community members can be as involved in the launch of these projects as they have been. And so, Derek, kind of in a similar vein, when you're looking back at 12 months since we did all of this, 12 months since we launched, 12 months since kind of really engaging with the community in a direct way, what has that milestone meant for Moonbeam?
Yeah, I want to riff a little bit on some of the comments Emily made. That I think that's the thing that's special about Polkadot is the architecture of the software that kind of allows this network effect of interactions between these 36 teams. And so even if I think about what are some of the most meaningful things, it's in the interactions, the cross-chain interactions that are possible. And so I think this is something that is quite unique and special. It's not just that there's 36 blockchains, but it's that there's 36 blockchains that are set up in such a way that they can interact, they can specialize into different areas, they can get what it is that they're not good at from other parachains that are part of the system. It is quite a unique architecture, and I don't think it exists anywhere else in the same way. And so that's something that back when at the beginning of the project, when we were thinking about where we wanted to deploy, that was something that was extremely attractive, to us as a team, and that continues to be something that is I think very special and very attractive. If I think back on what the years meant, I think that those are some of the best things. Are basically even if you look at our launch of XC20, so this basically just being able to even have tokens flow around using XCM within Polkadot. Many of them have made their way to Moonbeam to access, DeFi venues, other kinds of things like on Moonbeam within the EVM there. That's all made possible by this kind of shared system that we're all part of. And so I think that's kind of the thing that is the validation a year in, is that, there was this vision for this larger system. Sometimes people find it complex, right? They're like, oh, it's very complicated. But in the end, it's powering all of these interactions between all of these different teams in a way that doesn't require agreements, doesn't require kind of off-chain paper things to happen, right? It just works because the system is mediating all these interactions. That's the special thing, from my point of view.
And I think too, if we look back at the launch process itself and how that looked, largely due to the Polkadot architecture, that's something that's pretty unique as well. I don't remember the exact timeline, but I think it was 2.5 to 3 weeks between sort of the Genesis block and this fully live milestone for Moonbeam. And so that's something that I think is a really interesting component of the architecture.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, I think that in a lot of things, things have been quite well thought through. Even if you think about Kusama as a network too, and its role as a canary net, among other things. These are all things that have made like the launch like a success. And I mean, obviously, like this, you made back to the point of I can't remember how many upgrades it was, 18 upgrades or whatever it was. I mean, that's also something that is kind of uniquely enabled by Substrate, by the architecture. And I think that's something that over time, in my experience, it's like software that is able to adapt more quickly to changing market conditions, changing, understanding of like user needs. Those are the kinds of software projects that are more successful, right? Just being able to move faster, to be more adaptable. And so that's, that's something that, I'm quite proud of on the Moonbeam side as well, how we've been able to do that.
It's certainly, I think, a unique characteristic for any launch that I've been a part of. And so it's exciting to see so many teams continue to deploy on top of Polkadot and join us in this kind of crazy, wild world. So in a similar vein, and this is for both of you guys, so I'll kind of defer to you on who wants to jump in first. But when you look back at the past year of Polkadot and Moonbeam, which is not an accidental naming scheme, what stands out as sort of milestones that were important or notable?
I mean, I can jump in first. I mean, and I think I already mentioned it. Like to me, it's like XCM, and that's like a critical capability. And I think that what you realize is that this cross-chain messaging, you have to kind of like engineer it in like from the beginning to have it like be good. And so this idea that was engineered like into the whole architecture of the system from the start, and it basically leverages things like the shared security model that Polkadot has. That's like a very important feature set. That's part of the motivation of like why we on Moonbeam kind of chose to deploy like onto Polkadot. And so I think the thing that I think of first, like when you ask that question, are like these like XCM integrations like with like other parachains. And so 2022 was the year of like these like cross-chain messaging like technologies like coming to market. And the fact that XCM came to market, and then we were able to use it like in a productive way, where I think there's like Polkaholic, you can go look like there's like quite a bit of activity of XCM activity happening to and from Moonbeam. That's like kind of in my mind was the core mission. That's like what good looks like. That there's like all these like interactions now happening to and from Moonbeam using XCM.
Right. Yeah. So I can only add to that. Absolutely. From the second XCM was launched and all the adoption that it saw and all of the use cases that came from it, right? Like this concept of when you join Polkadot, you're joining a community, and actually you don't need to, if you need a DEX, you don't need to build it yourself. You can utilize that within the ecosystem, or you can interoperate with all of these other blockchains and even maybe on other networks or in the relative blockchain space. Everyone talks about, oh, this is my competitor, and a competitor is just being someone that's building in the same category of thing that you're building in. But on Polkadot, it's just someone that you're interoperating with, and that you have some functionality and they have some functionality, and your end users can both utilize that and take advantage of that. I also think like in just 1 year from Moonbeam's launch, going from 0 to over 300 dApps built on top of it, and some things that like you guys also had the Illuminate hackathon and conference this year, as well as hosted an entire location for Polkadot Decoded in New York City, which was a huge undertaking to say the least, and which was successful as a whole with Polkadot Decoded and everything. So I think there's so much there. I mean, honestly, I could talk for a long time. I don't know how deep you want to go on how like all the things that the parachains have accomplished and have like accomplished together, and the countless partnerships, integrations, and so on. It just, I could go on forever.
So I think there's a couple of things I wanted to jump back to quickly too. And I would say as well, kind of to your last point, Emily, about just having a lot that we could talk about here. This space continues to move at a clip that amazes me every day. It's like no matter how long you've been in the space, it continues to sort of overwhelm you with the speed at which some of these innovations happen. And so I agree wholeheartedly. Like, it's very difficult to kind of just pick out a couple things over the last 12 months. Whereas, in the Web2 space, it's pretty easy to pick a couple key projects over the course of a year. But we're kind of constantly dealing with that, like, very happy struggle to highlight just a couple of things. I did want to go back to some of the comments you both made about XCM, because I'm realizing I'm not sure how much we really talked about what XCM is and what it enables. And I wanted to use that as an opportunity to not just kind of maybe explain it in a little bit more of an approachable way, but to also talk about, like, I hate to throw out this term, but there's this heterogeneous sharding architecture of Polkadot, right? Which is the concept that, kind of to your comments earlier, Emily, all of these new blockchains, all of these parachains can be different, and they can have different structures and different motivations. And so when you look at those two things, which are both pretty unique to Polkadot, what is XCM? How does one enable the other? Like, what is the play between those two concepts?
Right. So XCM is just a cross consensus message. You might hear it partnered with HRMP, which is horizontal relay chain message passing. Essentially, all you need to know for those that are not tuned into the blockchain is an XCM is a text message, right? And it's everything from, or if you take the mail, like how mail is sent in the world, XCM would be the envelope, it would be the address on the envelope and the seal, and it would be the letter inside. Whereas like HRMP and which is a stopgap to XCMP, is like the mailman and how messages get sent. HRMP is within the Polkadot ecosystem and solely can't, because it's consensus based, it can only be used within Polkadot, like the transmission. However, XCM as a language, essentially, which is what it is, can be used outside of Polkadot, just like IBC can, right? So you can send an XCM message externally over a bridge to another chain on another network. And that's so that's what we're talking about when we say that XCM was enabled this year and allowed teams to communicate with one another. But we're not just talking about token transfers or even like arbitrary messages, but XCM has the ability to even call a command on another chain. And we saw this happening with teams like a Star, who full on swapped their Kusama parachain because it had one lease expired and then the next lease was up. So they used XCM to call it to switch the chain, right? And so that's the ability of what I mean when I say to call something to happen on another chain. And so XCM is also more than just messages or token transfers, but also these commands and a bunch of things that you can do with XCM.
Yeah, I mean, I can maybe tackle the second part of what you talked about there, Katie, which is around this heterogeneous sharding. It's like a mouthful there, but I guess from my perspective, the key thing there is that for many developers, like, when Web3 dApps first came about, there was just Ethereum, right? So that was like one way to express yourself. You had to express yourself, in Solidity as a smart contract. I think when you have a full blockchain, when you make a full blockchain, there's a much broader range of expression, back to that like canvas idea, right? So you can like express yourself in like a much more broader way. You can like customize like the full environment to like your use case. The thing is, in the past, that's been like, it's very hard, right? So to build a blockchain from scratch was like a multi-year like team of PhDs kind of exercise. And so I think that's the power of Substrate, is that it really dramatically simplifies like a team's ability to launch a blockchain. So that's, we at Moonbeam use Substrate to create Moonbeam as a parachain. All of those other 36 chains are also use Substrate. So that's the key thing, is you realize there was this demand, but there was just like difficulty, like there was holding back like that demand from expressing itself. And then when you create something like Substrate, you can see that the demand is like there to basically deploy chains. And I think that it's always getting like easier over time, right? So like, I see that this kind of fits in with my vision that there's going to be many, many blockchains in the world with all kinds of different purposes. And so you have a framework like Substrate, like helps reduce the friction there. You have a system like Polkadot that helps these things all communicate and work together. I mean, these are all like knock-on effects from this like many blockchains kind of world.
I think that's a really interesting point too. When I look back at sort of the evolution of Moonbeam since its early days, kind of with the first website and the first communications from 2020, really that vision has stayed pretty consistent, I think, in terms of, seeing a world where there's many blockchains. Maybe we didn't have the mechanisms for how you could communicate between these different blockchains. But today we have, I think, a little bit more clarity on what that might look like. Emily had some interesting examples in terms of the types of things that XCM has been used for on Polkadot. I wonder, Derek, could you maybe provide, maybe at a high level, some other explanations or some other examples of like what we've seen secure messaging as having been able to do so far?
Yeah, I would say that. I would say one domain where like we are seeing like adoption of cross-chain messages is in like the DeFi like space. And I think in particular, like cross-chain DeFi scenarios that get traction are ones where, because in DeFi now, it tends to be that, you have some set of tokens, they are necessarily on some given chain, and then maybe they're deposited into a DeFi protocol, but they're like locked there, right? They're like locked in a particular place. I think the use case that is kind of a, no pun intended, an unlock, like in this case, is to allow like those, like the fact of that locking to be used like anywhere, right? So it may be that you're, locking something on a particular chain, but the knowledge that locking has happened, whereas before that was just on that chain, like in question, now it can be anywhere. So it might be that like I lock something on chain A, but now that enables me to go do something interesting on chains B, C, D, other chains basically. And so that, even that simple idea, I think is, people are kind of chewing on that as to like what that means for DeFi. And I can already see that there's a lot of different ideas like forming here. Particularly, I know on Moonbeam, there's several teams pursuing novel like lending and borrowing architectures, like using this kind of pattern. There's a lot of like cross-chain like swaps, like using this pattern. There's some stablecoin like designs I've seen that are now using like this kind of idea. So I think that we're in the early stages here of people figuring out, well, now I have these new tools, this new canvas to draw on, like how can I draw on it and kind of do something interesting and novel that's going to be competitive with existing approaches.
I think that what's become very clear in the last 6 months from my personal perspective is just how diverse this kind of functionality can be for really creative developers who can see opportunities like you described, Derek, to kind of take information that may be present on one chain and use it on another, which of course makes things much, much easier, but it's also just more efficient in a lot of ways. You're not constantly sort of relocating tokens between networks and addresses and wallets and sort of spending time shuffling the cards to some degree. You're able to kind of take better advantage, I would think, of some of the resources that you have on maybe a couple of networks, but to use them more broadly across blockchain as a whole. Yeah. So that, I think, is what everyone is most excited about for this year, certainly myself. I wanted to jump back, Emily, to talk a little bit about kind of Polkadot, and I think more broadly, some of the important things that are coming up on Polkadot. So the one that comes to mind for me is OpenGov, I think has been kind of a big initiative. So do you mind just giving us a little bit, I think, to address both of those, like what's coming up on Polkadot, as well as like what is this OpenGov thing that we're hearing about?
Yes, absolutely. So first, just high level kind of things that are coming up on Polkadot this year, at least, and I'm probably going to forget many things. But I think for this year going forward, the top things that come to mind would, one, be asynchronous backing. And what mainly you need to know about that is it would allow us to increase transaction speeds to anywhere between current estimates 100,000 transactions per second to 1 million. And this would be, as of now, the fastest blockchain out there. So that would be one of the main things coming this year, as well as parathreads. So parathreads are an alternative model to parachains, and it's more for low throughput chains. So you can think about it as like a cell phone plan. These auction winning parachains essentially have unlimited data. Once they are added to the network, everything is free, unlimited everything, unlimited transactions, storage. Everyone gets security in both models, but once you put up that, I want to say, bond that you get back in the end, then all of that is inclusive. It's an all-you-can-eat resort. But then a parathread, on the other hand, is pay-as-you-go. So these are for low-throughput chains, or even chains that are just starting out and want to connect to Polkadot and are still building out their functionality and maybe not doing hundreds of transactions per day. So they don't mind paying these low transaction fees that you have on proof of stake networks to just kind of pay as you go, and that is for them cheaper than even putting up the bond for the parachain slot. And so this also allows can either be for low throughput chains that don't have any or little to no transactions, things like maybe an identity parachain that doesn't send like any transactions, right? But also if you're a chain just starting out and you just want to connect to Polkadot as you're building functionality and still interoperate with other parachains and still benefit from Polkadot's shared security, you can connect as a parathread for free. And also, because you're not taking part in the auction, you have no lease slot. In other words, you're just there as long as you continue to pay, and there's no like end point until you decide to either upgrade to a parachain or even continue like that, because maybe, like I said, you're an identity chain that doesn't need this, that it's not beneficial for this unlimited data type plan, so to say. So I said parathreads, I said asynchronous backing. The other things would just be Polkadot specific, like the next versions. Oh, bridges, bridges. I'm really excited for bridges to come, which also leads me to like XCM v4 in later iterations of XCM for like messages, secure messages to be sent on our bridges with things like XCMP. So right now we have HRMP, which is like a stopgap, which does the job, but we want to, XCMP would be the full, vision come to life. So those would be the main ones. And then OpenGov. So we can go to OpenGov. OpenGov is currently running on Kusama. And after it's done its battle testing on Kusama, it will be rolled out on Polkadot. So in other words, rollout has already begun because all features get rolled out on Kusama first for this live testing in like a live environment. And the main differences between OpenGov and the current governance model is one, this concept of agile delegation. So on the current governance model, you can delegate your DOT or KSM to someone else in the ecosystem, whether it be a council member or a validator, and they vote on your behalf. But with agile delegation, there is now, you can delegate to different people for different things. So in the new, well, actually, okay, so first I'd have to explain why that would make more sense in OpenGov. On the current governance mechanism, you have something called the council, which is this elected body by DOT holders or KSM holders that actually pass all treasury proposals. And so you have public referendum that the community votes on, and then you also have treasury spends, which the council votes on. In OpenGov, all of that goes through and is voted on by the community. So there's no longer this, what I would say, like special body with special power to decide. But on the other side of that, then you have multiple tracks. So there's like a track for treasury spends, and there's a track for on-chain upgrades and all of these different tracks. And because of this, you might want to delegate your DOT to different people to vote on different things, because maybe the person you want voting on a a marketing spend, like, oh, does Polkadot go to Web Summit? X team wants to go to Web Summit in Polkadot's name. Maybe the same person that's voting on that on your behalf isn't the same person that you want voting on, does Polkadot get X upgrade? You might want someone more technical there, and you might want someone more marketing on the other one, and so to speak. So OpenGov allows multiple tracks. This also allows multiple votes happening at the same time. So it's far faster and far more scalable than the current governance mechanism. Because of that, it adds things like agile delegation, where you can delegate to different people for different tracks. It removes things like the council or these like special parties. I will add, it adds something called the fellowship, but the key word here is this special. The fellowship doesn't have the power that the council had. It is just another voting body, just like you and I. And it's not the council who is like currently deciding what treasury spends get spent, but they're just another voting party like ourselves. And some things that are coming with that is a new governance UI. And I say new, but we don't have a governance UI. We have Polka Assembly. But a new and approved governance UI, because you're probably asking yourself, wait, there's all of these tracks, there's all these people I can delegate to. How do I do that? Please tell me that there is a UI for that. And your prayers have been answered. There will be a UI that allows you to select who to delegate to certain things. On the marketing side, I would say we really want to push more people to vote. Some things users might not even realize is even you can vote with your stake dot, right? This doesn't need to be free, open on the market dot. You get with all your dot that's currently being staked, you can use to vote on things for the network. And we're also hoping, as of now, all the governance motions are really technical, and you're maybe thinking, you see a GitHub repo and it's like, should we add this to Polkadot? And you have no idea if you should vote yes or no. But maybe when you see things like, oh, should Polkadot go to X event and we would like to go and do X, Y, and Z, you might want to vote because, and one other thing that is currently being discussed even on the Polkadot forum is Sean Tabrizi is building this thing called a lottery palette to incentivize people to vote, where it randomly selects a user that is like, I don't know exactly if it'll be someone that's voting and staking, but to win this lottery on like, I don't know if it'll be a weekly basis or monthly basis, which is treasury funds, just to incentivize our users to like be active and vote on things. And even if you don't want to vote, again, there's delegation. So meaning, and you could still win the lottery by delegating. So just getting people to be more active users of Polkadot, which is one of the exciting things I'm looking forward to with OpenGov launching.
I think it's very kind of true to what we had talked about a little bit earlier with the community's kind of direct involvement with Polkadot, parachains, kind of the whole ecosystem. Derek, do you mind just giving kind of an update on Moonbeam, Moonriver, where OpenGov sits in regards to those chains?
Yeah, and actually, I learned something in this discussion. I didn't realize this lottery idea. This is quite interesting. So I'll have to speak to Sean about that. But yeah, so I mean, OpenGov, just for folks that don't know much about it, and that we're just listening to Emily describe it, it is the most sophisticated like on-chain governance system like in the market right now. And I think it's if I think back to my comments at the beginning of this hour, one of the principles that was guiding and it continues to guide Moonbeam development is around prioritizing decentralization. And so as a result, there is an OpenGov implementation that is like proposed for Moonriver, much like Polkadot, like a new code and features shipped to Moonriver, the Kusama deployment before shipping to Moonbeam, the Polkadot deployment. We follow exactly the same best practices there. And what I anticipate for the year is a lot of these OpenGov tracks being instantiated, created. The idea is that we very much would like to bring as much of the decision making, like in and around the network, put that to token holders, but set it up using these great new tools that OpenGov provides. And so obviously all of these, even these upgrades, are subject to community and token holder like approval. But I think there's just a very rich system for expressing different kinds of governance like structures, and probably most importantly, being able to do it in like a, back to that secure and reliable operation, right? To kind of do things in like a secure and reliable way where you can separate things like, upgrades that require a lot of privilege from, much more mundane things like I need to give tips, I need to, or maybe even like XCM channel openings, right? That might be in a different category might require a different category of privilege and might be more common. And so that's something to look forward to, that there will be a number of these OpenGov tracks, assuming the community approves, like on Moonriver and Moonbeam. And I think it's great. I mean, I think this will be a great opportunity for our community to engage, like in a variety of different ways, in like the actual governance of the network. And so, that's something I'm pretty excited about for 23, for this year.
Yeah, I think the common thread here is, I think the community has become and always has been really very central to Polkadot and Moonbeam each, but also holistically, like it's been very much built in at the architecture layer for sure, but even into programs and sort of how these ecosystems approach future developments. So there's a lot happening. It's sometimes hard to keep track of, but it's certainly an exciting time. We are running up against time here, so I just want to be cognizant of that. Do each of you maybe want to share just a couple closing thoughts in terms of things to look for maybe in 2023?
Go for it, Emily. I don't know if you had anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, all in all, I think 2023 is our year. I think you have to start out every year by saying that. But definitely on the ecosystem marketing front, now that parachains are live, you kind of see, I've been at Polkadot for 5 years, and like for the first like 4, it was just like getting Polkadot ready to launch. Right. And then that came to realization the second parachains were added, right? Because no longer was it about like, it is still about like the tech that Polkadot is, but now it's far more about the ecosystem and what's being built on top of it. And, the parachains are the ones with the end users or the next layer, well, whether it be dApps or so on. And so it's, and now you're starting to see a lot more things, the realization of Polkadot's tech and adoption is really coming from the parachain team. So I see this year being far more ecosystem focused. Hence, that's literally my whole job, which was never even a team or discipline, so to speak, at the entities behind the Polkadot's tech, as well as just on every aspect now going forward. Whenever you go to an event and you see a Polkadot booth, you will see all of the parachains, right? You won't just see Polkadot. It's all events that we're taking part in, we're taking the ecosystem with, because it's you guys that are getting that really should be speaking to people when talking about why Polkadot, right? Because it's really not why Polkadot, it's why should I build on Moonbeam, right? Or why, or what can I do on Moonbeam, right? Or these sorts of things. So I think we covered all the cool tech things that are happening. And other than that, I think it will just be, I'm really excited to see what happens as the ecosystem also continues to expand this next year, as well as everyone else. You guys only launched a year ago, but I know you guys have a ton of plans as well. And as more and more teams launch and enable more functionality, like we're really just getting started, even though we've accomplished so much. So it'll be exciting to see 1 year from now what we've all accomplished and where the Polkadot ecosystem is at.
Yeah, no, I think those are great thoughts. I don't want to close it off. I would just go back to a comment I made at the beginning, which is that you work on a protocol like Moonbeam, you create a thing, or you have a hand in creating a thing, and then its use kind of like definitely is well beyond like the imagination that you had at the time it was created. So I think that's the case here. If I think about the last year, and I think if there's something that I'm proudest of, it is like the, all of the people that are engaged like in and around the network. So that's, folks that are building things on Moonbeam. That's like our collators. That's like, token holders participating in governance. That's our ambassador community. And so I think if there's any one thing I'm proudest of, it's having helped facilitate, all of that. And for people to be able to find some meaningful thing to do, with Moonbeam is kind of helping, provide like an infrastructure or kind of a platform upon which, those things can happen, those meaningful interactions can happen. And so, I think that's the thing, I would like, I wish for kind of next year, when we do this again next year, I have a strong belief that community will be even bigger and stronger, and there'll be even like more interesting things that have happened like on the network.
Maybe just as a way to kind of close this off, we can talk about how the community can get more involved. So Emily, like where, if people are part of the ecosystem, where can they go to really kind of live up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you can really pick your social media platform of choice, whether it be Twitter, LinkedIn, Telegram, Discord, YouTube. We're everywhere there. You can also just go to Polkadot.network. We will be launching a new website in this coming year, which will also be more representative of like our community and such. Because right now, a lot of things are all over the place, but definitely follow us on social, and we will keep you up to date with all of the things that we discussed in this call that are coming out in the next year.
Excellent. So Derek, I was waiting for this slide to come back up, but there's sort of a lot of ways that the community can get involved. Do you mind just going through some of these from a community governance perspective, but just also more holistically, the things that are open for participants right now?
Yeah, sure. And on the last one, the ambassador program we have obviously has been and continues to be like a very active and a strong community. So that's an easy way to get involved. But as I mentioned around open gov based initiatives, I do think that there is quite a bit of opportunity for meaningful kind of engagement, interaction, like in and around different kinds of governance questions. And so there is a forum, forum.moonbeam Foundation, as well as Polk Assembly can be used to actually vote on different referenda that are up for voting. And I think that this is something that I would highly encourage folks that are in the community to get involved with. I think we have other ideas about helping teach people how to do delegations, as Emily was just mentioning. There's all kinds of new options, but there is already like a lot of interesting discussions happening in the community. And I would say if there's one thing it would be my ask would be to be a kind of a good Moonbeam citizen, take your civic duty kind of seriously, get involved. It's a very welcoming community, and invite every token holder to come and engage.
Great. Well, so thank you. I know there's a sort of a trivia initiative that's underway. So there we go, Kathy. If you don't mind sharing more information on that, I think we will take our exit. Thank you again, Emily and Derek, for joining us.
Yep.
Thank you, guys. And we'll start with the trivia now while we take some participants out of the screen. So where you can put your comments, and I'm going to bring Hime up too because she's going to be helping me. Hey, Hime, we're going to start of the trivia today. So I know that where you guys can put your comments, you should be able to also see a window that says Kahoot. If not, we're also going to be sharing the screen here and the game pin. So if Hime, maybe you can help me put in the game pin on the chat while I share my screen.
Yes.
And just to add some fun here, I'm gonna put some music, and then we're gonna get it started soon, guys.
So there you go. Okay. So right here in the comments is
have, so it's the link that I'm copying. 832. Let me copy it here. 832 2749. Here we go. 2749. Okay.
And you have to go to kahoot.com, right? There we
Yes.
go.
So I'm copying the link too in the comments so everyone can click in there and it will directly take you to the game. You don't have to put the game pin. If it asks you for the game pin, is 8322749.
And just to let you know, there are going to be 3 winners, which are going to be selected by like one, putting the correct answer, but also how fast you hit the correct answer. Winners are going to get very cool Moonbeam swag. So just wanted to mention that to like increase the boost.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wait a couple of minutes while everyone joins.
Sounds good.
And remember, everyone, the trivia questions are super related to everything we've talked about, what Katie's mentioned, what Derek's mentioned, and everything else you know from Moonbeam and Moon River.
Awesome. So I'm going to wait a couple more minutes.
Okay, we already have 13 players.
I cannot see them on the screen. Which one are you? Are you sure the correct one? I think that's another one, Jime.
You sure? Maybe it's because we both have it open.
No. My pin is like 305. Sorry, technical problems.
No worries. I can share my screen. I have everyone in here. Let me try.
Wait, but are you on the right Kahoot though? That's my question.
I'm in the
Okay, so you share the screen. Maybe because we're opening both screens. Give me one sec.
Here we go. Okay, here we go. Can you see it now?
Oh, yes. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, cool. I was like, why am I not seeing anyone? Why is my room so sad?
Like problems.
I was like, sad room.
Okay, let's go then. Let's start the trivia game. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. First question. Moonbeam implemented a variety of new programs. Which programs are open to the Moonbeam community and ecosystem?
And this is a multi-select question, so that means that you can choose more than just one.
Let's go.
3, 2, 1. All of them. So it seems that we got some people that hit it right.
Let's see the scoreboard.
And just to comment a little bit on these programs. So the Moonbeam community and ecosystem has access to a variety of programs. Some of them are going to be to like put proposals on Treasury. Others ones, so if you're a builder, you can educate yourself about like how to build on Moonbeam, how to use the cross-chain functionalities. But also if you're new to this space and you are like, you want to understand more how like Web3 works and also how to get started in Polkadot in general, I think like the Moon Builders Academy is a good space for this. There are going to be also new programs coming this year, but like what we want to share with you guys is that there is more in the Moonbeam ecosystem and community that I think that you can take advantage of for education, for being part of, for participating in governance and other stuff. So let's see, we have Mar, Tom, and SC on the top of the leaderboard. Remember, this can change on the next questions. Thanks, Jime.
Here we go. How many layer 1s and 2 outside of Polkadot are connected to Moonbeam?
And this one is just one answer, I believe.
Yeah. It was mentioned by, I think, Katie or Derek.
Yeah, this was on the presentation.
Yeah, let's see. 2, 1. Yeah. Everyone was paying attention.
Ooh, okay. So
Jamie.
Marwan is still like getting that first place. Then we have Yuri and Patel that have moved other people playing like to the bottom. Cool. Wow, look, Alex like jumped 10 spaces. That's crazy.
Okay, now
We have some collators here. Go for it, Hime.
collators and Moonbeam. This is just one answer, so you need to pick what does our collators on Moonbeam do. And interesting. Yes, create new blocks on the blockchain.
Well, they're like also like the second was like kind of correct, but that's sort of like the validators on Polkadot. But like we have Mar1 keeping the space. Awesome. Yuri still there. Patel dropped down, and I see SC going back again. Good guys.
Now, the Moonbeam Academy is based in 2 different languages. Besides English, what other language is the program taught in?
And this is the Moon Builders Academy. I know that we have other channels that are already translated, but this one is specifically to the academy.
Nice.
Getting there. Yeah, Spanish will be a good one to have it soon.
Next question.
Keeping the position.
Yeah. Okay, next question. How many parachains are connected to Moonbeam using XPM? This was in the presentation too.
Perfect.
Let's see the scoreboard.
We had a change here. Mary went felt. I don't see the user. Okay, so we have Elpat, SC, Yuri on the top, and they are the ones. If the game ended today, right now, they will get the swag. But like the scoreboard still can change.
Let's see. What month did Moonbeam fully launch?
I think this one is pretty easy. 1 year breakthrough, someone?
Three, two, one. Yes.
Good. That's why we're here today celebrating.
This should be the bonus question.
Right? Yeah. Okay, this changed everything.
Oh my goodness. Okay, Mar is up again now. Leo is leading the scoreboard. Interesting. Let's see. How long is the parachain lease period on Polkadot? Okay, this was also mentioned in the presentation. Let's see who remembers.
Player One Taco gave the answer in the comments of the Moonbeam launch. Happened January 11, exactly a year ago. Yes. Okay, cool. I bet all of NAC participated on the crowd loan. That's why they know too.
Well, look at this. Patel is now leading the scoreboard.
Changing.
Let's see.
Oh, we're getting to the last 4 questions. Everything can change.
Everything can change. Which of the following is not a way to get involved with Moonbeam governance? See.
17 answers. We're getting there. Boom.
Look at the discourse.
So yeah, Polkadot Discourse is the only way that you cannot participate on the Moonbeam governance. For Moonbeam governance, you can do or snapshot, or you can do a Moonbeam forum that is also is in Discourse, is the Moonbeam Discourse, all through also Polk Assembly.
Let's see.
Oh, YR going up. Good.
That's 3. How many projects are in the Moonbeam and Moonriver ecosystem combined based on downtown Moonbeam consensus? This was
You can
also
go to like downtownmoonbeam.com and check there. Just a hint. But like actually like dtmb.com. You gotta guys might go take a look.
yes. Got it right.
Good.
Let's see. YR still leading. Okay. Last 2 questions. The Moonbeam name was inspired by a song from the following singer.
The name of the song, just to give you guys a little of help, was called Polkadots and Moonbeams. Now, who is the singer of Polkadots and Moonbeams? Yes. Frank Sinatra was the inspiration, and actually in Polkadot Decoded in New York, we had like a almost like real life like size Frank Sinatra there singing the song because that was the inspiration of the Moonbeam name.
I remember our friend Frankie.
Ooh. Okay, board on fire.
Almost finishing. Okay. Moonbeam put on a virtual conference, hack, and community challenge recently. What was the joint name of the event?
Too many events this year. Showtime. I love that.
And by the way, it was so much fun having all those projects in the ecosystem. Yes.
Good.
Let's see.
Are we going to the last question now?
Yes, we are.
That was fast.
Okay, last question. Which of the acronyms below belong to the Moonbeam's cross-chain messaging technology? This should also be the bonus question.
Yeah. This is the last question, so this one will define who are the winners.
2, 1, time's up. Yes.
Good. So, well, yeah, it was confusing. We get it, but it's all of the both. Yeah.
And dun, 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 dun. To the podium.
Tom, 3rd place. Congratulations. UA, congratulations. And the winner is
Yay!
This was awesome. So for the 3 winners, we're gonna send you an email right after this event ends. So like, we're gonna reach out to you for your swag bags. And for everyone that like came today to celebrate Moonbeam's 1-year breakthrough, like thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much for being so supportive with the community, with the ecosystem, with the growth of the network. We could not be here today if it wasn't for you. So let's continue bringing and building the multi-chain future and making the community and ecosystem bigger every day. Thank you so much. Jimenez, any final words?
Thank you so much to everyone, and please keep building, keep participating with us. This has been such an exciting year. I cannot believe it's 1 year from the launching, and I'm pretty sure we'll have more exciting things coming up.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys, and see you on our next event that I'm sure is going to be pretty soon. Bye, guys.
Bye.